Hello there, I'm your host, Max Hassler, and today I present to you an episode of The Brady Bunch. Today, we'll be talking about the Second Industrial Revolution. The Second Industrial Revolution was a period of industrial development, scientific discovery, and mass production in Europe, Asia, and America that happened in the 19th century. The Second Industrial Revolution invented many tools and machines to help with production of goods and to help with transportation. It had a huge impact on many countries' economy and wealth. So, let's talk more about it by answering a couple of these questions. Our first question of the day is to summarize the significance of achievements in the new industries that emerged during the Second Industrial Revolution. And to answer this question, we have our first special guest of the day, Henry Gill. Henry Gill, take it away.
Thanks, Max. The Second Industrial Revolution, which began in the late 19th century, was marked by significant advancements in the steel, chemical, and electricity industries. These advancements had a profound impact on production and transportation, enabling faster and more efficient manufacturing processes, enabling the development of new forms of transportation. The steel industry was revolutionized by the Bessemer process, which allowed for the mass production of high-quality steel. This led to the construction of larger and stronger buildings, bridges, and ships, which should be made at a lower cost. The steel industry also played a key role in the development of railroads, which became the backbone of transportation in many countries. The chemical industry made significant advancements in the production of synthetic materials, such as plastics and fertilizers, which transformed the way goods were produced and transported. For example, synthetic materials could be made at a lower cost and were often more durable than natural materials, which made them ideal to use in transportation infrastructure. Electricity was perhaps the most significant advancement of the Second Industrial Revolution, enabling a wide range of new possibilities in production and transportation. Electric power could be used to drive machines, which increased manufacturing efficiency and productivity. It also enabled the development of new forms of transportation, such as electric streetcars and subway systems, which revolutionized urban transportation. In conclusion, the advancements in the steel, chemical, and electricity industries during the Second Industrial Revolution had a profound impact on production and transportation. They enabled the mass production of high-quality goods at a lower cost, the construction of stronger, more durable infrastructure, and the development of new forms of transportation that transformed the way people and goods were moved from one place to another. Back to you, Max.
Thanks so much, Henry, for answering that question. Our second question is to identify and explain how achievements in transportation and communication affected migration during the 19th century. And to answer this question, we have our second special guest of the day, Zachary Eisenstat. Zachary Eisenstat, you have the floor.
Thanks, Max. So during the 19th century, some 32 million people migrated from overseas into the U.S. This led to the United States attempting to expand west across the country. At the start of the 19th century, the U.S. citizens primarily traveled on horseback or on rivers. It was the invention of the steamboat that revolutionized river transportation, and is how settlers first began to move into the Midwest of the continental U.S. However, it was the introduction of the railroad that facilitated the movement across the country. Transcontinental rail lines opened the west and east and allowed for many settlers to migrate to new lands. Railroads carried crops from the west and east to the east and brought back manufactured goods, which is what allowed for settlements and cities to pop up and start growing. However, moving across the country at the time was a great deal, and many people were skeptical about it. However, improvements in communication technology during the time provided a way for people to find out about the great opportunities in the West. Technologies like the telegraph allowed for businesses to make deals with people in the West, and for settlers to communicate back to family in the East, and allowed for facilitated communication to convince people to move. These technologies gave people the opportunity to form new communities in the West, and many immigrants who moved to the U.S. from Europe saw this as a perfect opportunity to start over.
Thanks so much, Zach. Our third question is to compare the industrialization efforts of the United States and Russia. To answer this question, we have, again, Zachary Eisenstat. Zachary Eisenstat, what do you have to say?
So the United States was actually able to industrialize very quickly due to the country's size, its vast amounts of resources, and it had an expanding domestic market. And also one of the key things was it had political stability. The government played a major role in America's industrialization. They granted tax breaks, grants of public land, and laws enabling easy formations of corporations, which fostered the rise of large businesses. They pioneered new techniques to produce a mass market. However, class conflict was still a major problem in America, as the working class underwent protests and strikes. However, unlike in Europe, there was no emergence of a political party to represent the working class. America strongly lacked socialism. Russia, on the other hand, actually started its revolution later than most countries and was kind of behind in the world economy. Unlike America, as the revolution went on, socialism began to erupt in the middle class. Business owners had to suppress growing radicalism ideas in the working class, and unlike in America, there was an absence of legal unions and political parties, as the Tsar had unchecked power. However, eventually Marxist ideals led into the working class, causing the working class to legally form the Russian Social Democratic Labor Party. Soon in 1905, the working class would launch a revolution to overthrow the Tsar. Once this happened, Russia began to look a little bit more like America, and they started introducing political parties and unions. However, the biggest difference between the two would be how the government went towards industrializing the country.
Thanks again, Zach. Our next question is to identify and explain how socialism emerged as a reaction to capitalism. Capitalism is an economic system in which production and distribution are privately owned, and socialism is characterized by social ownership of production as opposed to private ownership. Because of this, socialism emerged as a reaction to capitalism because capitalism showed how privately owned production does not work well as sharing the power, and so socialism was made to contradict capitalism. The Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy said that in the Second Industrial Revolution, capitalism was everywhere. When factories had people doing labor, that was considered capitalism because only a few people of the upper class decided the pay for the factory workers, and many people thought this was unfair and wrong, so many people started to agree with the idea of socialism so that people would stop being treated unfairly. However, some people agreed with capitalism because according to The Century of Capitalism, what the 19th century stood for, capitalism meant more labor, and more labor meant cheaper prices for goods, and people liked paying less money even if it meant people would be suffering. Some of the complaints of the 19th century socialists about capitalist systems of industrial Europe was that in a capitalist system, it caused economic equality. To fix the problems of the capitalist systems, the socialists reduced unemployment rates and wealth disparities to give more power and opportunity to the poor. They also made better use of resources and excess production so that things would not go to waste, and more resources could be available to more people of all classes. Another thing that socialists did was implement minimum wage so that people would not be labored and treated unfair. They added more safety protocols to the factories so that people would not die and not be treated harshly. Our next question is to describe the following reactions to industrialization: women's suffrage, public education, and labor movements. The reaction that industrialization had on women's suffrage was that although many women got to work, they had to work in harsh factories and owners would take advantage of them because they were desperate for work, so the owners would underpay them. According to the passage, how did the roles of women change during the Second Industrial Revolution? It says that it was common for women to lose limbs when working in textile mills. Also, women were only allowed to work in unskilled jobs that had less pay because the social gap was still very large between women and men, so women never had jobs that had much power or money. The reaction that industrialization had on public education is that many people had positive attitude towards education because the smarter the people are, the better the job they can get and the more money they can make. And so, many public schools improved by gaining more and more resources from the state. Also, schools started to become mandatory for all kids under 10 in the 1880s, and school started to become more available to people of the poor due to a decrease of price needed to go, and more schools were appearing due to the population increase, so kids without modes of transportation would not have to walk as far to a school. The reaction that industrialization had on labor movements was that many people were not happy being laborers, and so lots of riots and strikes took place to revolt against the poorly treated people. New machinery and systems in the factories and new demands for lots of items caused labor in the 19th century to reach an all-time high, The workers gained close to nothing and worked very long hours with not much safety at all because the states didn't want to pay for damages to the people and wanted to work as much as possible because they wanted all the money they could get and to be the most efficient they could possibly be. Many people were dying and starving due to the low money, so people started uprisings like the Pullman strike, the Homestead strike, and the Haymarket riot to put an end to the labor. For our last question of the day, we have our third special guest, Tahje. His question is to identify and explain the ways that industrialization impacted imperialism in the 19th century. Take it away, Tahje.
Thanks, Max. The Industrial Revolution was the force behind the new imperialism, as it created not only the need for Europe to expand, but also the power to successfully take and profitably maintain so many colonies overseas. Due to the Industrial Revolution, there was an even larger push to conquer territories as there was an enormous hunger for materials to satisfy demands. Thus, the Western powers sought colonies where raw materials were abundant and where they could be appropriated at little to no cost. For example, due to the American Civil War creating a large shortage of cotton supply, Britain and France had to turn to Egyptian cotton. With the ending of slavery in the South, the cotton industry needed a new source of raw material supply and labor. The Western countries looked at Western Africa, India, and China for these needs. Industrialization gave European powers a military advantage over the other regions of the world. European armies were equipped with modern weapons such as rifle and artillery, which gave them a significant advantage over traditional armies that relied on spears and bows. For example, Britain's military superiority played a key role in colonizing India, a highly populated and military advanced region. The development of new technologies such as steam engines, railroads, and telegraphs made it easier for European powers to colonize and control other parts of the world. The steamship, for example, made it easier for European powers to transport troops, supplies, and raw materials across the world open. The telegraph made it easier for colonial officials to communicate with their home government and coordinate the administration of colonies. In conclusion, industrialization significantly impacted the imperialism in the 19th century. It fueled the expansion of European powers into other regions of the world through the extraction of raw materials, the development of new technology in transportation, military superiority, and economic competition. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. A primary source for this information was the Industrial Revolution was the force behind new imperialism, written by Dana Parnova. Call it a DuPage. This article discusses and develops the ideas of how the Industrial Revolution impacted imperialism, mainly throughout Europe, by providing examples and specific details throughout the text.
Thank you so much, Tahje, for answering our last question. A primary source that we found was this picture. This picture shows people working in a factory in the 19th century, but it shows tons of machinery of which the people used to help them be more efficient, which helps the claim that the Second Industrial Revolution improved production all around the world for forever. To sum it all up, the Second Industrial Revolution had many achievements in steel, chemistry, electricity, and transportation that drastically changed the world of production. Many people migrated to popular areas with more transportation and goods so they could have easy access to all the new things. The US industrialized by using their vast amount of resources, and Russia industrialized by using their government and ideas. The fight against capitalism systems caused socialism to become more relevant. Women gained little rights and were treated poorly. More schools were implemented, and many people fought against labor with movements. Also, it caused many countries to be more imperialists and want to conquer more territory. Thank you so much for watching this episode of The Bruni Bunch. We hope to see you again next time. Peace.